Hi, Lester, Wushu Engineer. Is a 1-inch punch useful in self-defense? Firstly, what does useful mean? Within the context of a self-defense situation, something could be considered useful if it brings the defender closer to a positive resolution of the self-defense situation. Ultimately, this positive resolution would generally involve the defender making themselves safe in response to a situation that has endangered them in some way. Depending on the nature of the situation, that could mean removing themselves from the dangerous situation or somehow neutralizing the threats in that situation. So anything that could help to achieve these outcomes could be considered useful. Secondly, we should answer the question, what is a 1-inch punch? I'm sure that most of you have an idea, but I recently uploaded a video on the 0-inch punch in which I discussed some of the mechanics of short-range power generation. I encourage you to check out this video as background. Simply put, a 1-inch punch is a very short-range strike that does not involve a drawback or preparation movement in order to throw the punch and does not allow very much space for acceleration of the fist. Bruce Lee made the strike very popular, and he typically used a variation of the punch that involved striking with the fist from fingertip distance away from the target. So typically he would hold his fingertips like so against the target and then punch straight from there. Technically, this is not 1 inch away from the target. It's more like 3 inches, but for the sake of the video, we will call it a 1-inch punch, since that is what most people refer to it as. Whether 1 or 3 inches, it still represents a very short range attack. So I performed a series of 1-inch punches on the load cell.
824, 995, 1035, 913.
You will notice that I used very limited linear body movement in order to perform the 1-inch punch. Many who perform this punch depend on throwing their body weight forward linearly to collide with the opponent. You'll see this in many 1-inch punch attempts, where the practitioner falls forward or leans forward and then often rebounds away from the target. Our particular system of Wushu does not operate using collisions of that nature. Instead, you'll notice that I try to use a centered rotation in order to generate torque from the hip area and then convert that into linear forward motion through my arm into a punch. So the maximum peak force I generated in my 1-inch punch was just over 1035 newtons of force. Now that's equivalent to about 105 kilograms or 232 pounds. The Wushu scientist also performed a set of 1-inch punches under the same constraints as my attempts and generated a peak force of 499 newtons. This is equivalent to about 50 kilograms or 112 pounds. So are these values useful? My best back fist strike measured 5,467 newtons of force on the load cell, which is equivalent to 557 kilograms or 1,229 pounds. This makes my 1-inch punch look a bit feeble. The Mythbusters once did an investigation into the 1-inch punch on episode 109, Ninjas 2, in which Jamie Heineman performed a full punch that registered 325 pounds on their load cell. This is equivalent to 1,445 newtons of force. Another study, which I'll provide a reference for in the description below, found that for elite, intermediate, and novice boxers, respectively, the mean maximal straight punching forces were 4,800 newtons, 3,722 newtons and 2,381 newtons for the rear hand, and 2,847 newtons, 2,283 newtons, and 1,604 newtons for the lead hand. This means that my 1-inch punch delivered more than 71% of the impact force of Jamie's full punch, 36% of an elite boxer's lead hand punch, 45% of an intermediate boxer's lead hand punch, and 64% of a novice boxer's lead hand punch. The peak generated force for a 1-inch punch is certainly less than can be achieved using a full punch, but is still not insignificant in comparison. But are these 1-inch punches even strikes, or are they more like pushes? Of course, the difference between a strike and a push is the intent. Both strikes and pushes are applicable in self-defense, but the intent behind a push is to accelerate the target in some direction, while the intent behind a strike is to create an impact that damages the target in some way. So let's look at a comparison between my 1-inch punch waveform and the waveform for a back fist I performed a few weeks ago. So hopefully you'll be able to see these waveforms. You'll notice that there are two types of waveforms here. The first squiggly waveform is my back fist strike that I performed a few weeks ago, and the lower, longer duration pulses are my 1-inch punches that I performed earlier. So apart from the very obvious differences between the two types of waveform, which are really due to the fact that the back fist strike is more of a kinetic, high velocity impact. So it's a higher velocity impact than the 1-inch punch. You'll see that the location of the primary force peaks for the back fist and for the 1-inch punch are actually fairly close together. In fact, the time that it took to deliver the peak force on my back fist was 12 milliseconds, and it took only 17 milliseconds to deliver the peak force on my 1-inch punch. So not that much of a difference between the two in terms of the duration of time to deliver peak force. As can be seen, the relatively rapid rise of the initial impact peak of this 1-inch punch is definitely a damaging impact. It represents a damaging impact with the target, not just simply acceleration of the target. I did a bit of light free sparring with the Wushu scientist to try to find an opportunity to showcase the application of a 1-inch punch. So why would I use the 1-inch punch as opposed to some other strike that I could accelerate over a greater distance to achieve more impact force with? Well, to put it bluntly, I wouldn't, if I had a choice. As with most martial artists who can perform these kinds of short-range attacks, we would not choose to use these reduced output attacks in self-defense if we can use more optimal attack and defense. To borrow a phrase from Matt Easton of the YouTube channel Scholar Gladiatoria, context is everything. Incidentally, if you haven't subscribed to Scholar Gladiatoria yet, check it out and sub. Matt's content is excellent and informative. Within the context of a self-defense situation, the defender does not always have the luxury of time and space within which to optimize their attack and defense. Perhaps the defender is swamped with multiple opponents. Perhaps weapons are at play, reducing time constraints. Many circumstances can reduce the options available to the defender. As such, systems like our own system of wushu seek to prepare the practitioner to function effectively in suboptimal conditions, because in all likelihood that is the kind of situation that one is more likely going to be in. Criminals contemplating violent crime typically try to improve the odds of their success by using ambush tactics, employing superior numbers, or using weapons. As such, a person who is trying to defend themselves against such criminal violence will typically be operating against the odds. This is why being able to operate from suboptimal positions is advantageous. It's not that a 1-inch punch would be my first choice attack. It's that a 1-inch punch may be my only choice, given the circumstances I am facing, the context within which I am operating. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!